Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our 25th TheEdCollab gathering. It is hard to believe that we've been through 25 of these, but we are so happy that you are here and joining us this morning. Before we get started, just a few announcements, a few things for anyone who's joining us for the first time, or reminders if you've been with us before in the past. And then we'll move over to our opening keynote. So today's theme, teaching literacy in the present tense, this was in part born from an amazing blog post by one of the TheEdCollab fellows, Kathleen Tanis. You can find the post, Teaching in the Present Tense, Lessons from Dream Teaching, on community.theedcollab.com. That's our blog. There, Kathleen's post is, if you need to be reassured, if you need to feel that you can move forward, if you have at all felt, like many of us, unsure how to navigate this bizarre time in our timelines, Kathleen really gives us incredible words of wisdom. And so thank you, Kathleen, for that post and for letting us borrow and take a riff on your post title for today's session. Teaching literacy in the present tense is about just that. How do we respond to the now that we and our students are in? How do we hold on to the things that matter the most and not lose them? And how do we really fight and work towards a future that we all deserve? By joining the gathering, you're joining an international online community of folks who have tuned in for previous sessions, are joining us on this one as well too. Many of you are watching live from all over the world, and others of you are watching this at some point in the future. If you are following either live or want to see the recorded sessions in the future, you can access the schedule on gathering.theedcollab.com. And on each of the sessions, so for example, on the upcoming session, let's say you want to join Lois Barker's book talk. At the top of that schedule, there's a button that says Watch and Chat Live. You just click that, and it'll take you straight to the YouTube page. Or if you are on the go, you can watch from YouTube anywhere. You can go on to youtube.com/TheEdCollab, or I have on my smart TV right over there, I can see myself talking to you now because I have the YouTube app on my smart TV. So anywhere that you are watching, you can join our gathering today. All of the sessions are in order, and you can choose your own adventure to watch along. We ask you to please like and subscribe our YouTube channel, because by you liking and subscribing to our channel, it helps to share these powerful sessions with other educators that can stumble upon them. So thank you for doing that. Many of you have, but if you haven't, please click the like button on any video that you like, and please do subscribe to our channel. Clock hours are available for today's gathering, both to watch live, or if you're watching this into the future, you can go to gathering.theedcollab.com/clock hours for more information, including deadlines. And the TheEdCollab, we are the host of today's gathering, and all 25 or 24 that we've done before today, now being our 25th. You likely know us. If you don't, you can learn more about us at TheEdCollab.com. And please do, as you are watching along today, please do tag us in any social posts that you make. You can find us at the TheEdCollab in many places on social media. At the TheEdCollab, part of what we do are these gatherings. Part of what we do is our literacy think tank. And then a large part of what we do is working with schools and universities and literacy organizations. We right now are scheduling for next school year. So if you would like to work with us, please find us at TheEdCollab.com, and there you can gather more information. Also, if you're trying to contact one of our speakers and you can't find them, you can also find a contact form there and say, how do I talk to Dr. Jaber? And we can say, oh, here's her contact information. So anything you might need, please reach out to us. The gathering is totally free. It has always been. If you are joining us on this powerful day, you are doing so with no registration, no fee. You're going to join an incredible day of learning for nothing. And that's because the gathering is in one part our gift to the education community, And in another part, it's a place where we hope you can take the joy that you feel across the day, the hope that you get across the day, the ideas that you get to use inside of your classroom. And we hope that from those, you can pay the joy forward. Every gathering, we adopt several charities, and we ask you to decide if you normally would buy a cup of coffee on a conference day like this, those $2 or $5 or $10 or however much you're paying for a latte now, instead of paying that towards that coffee, to pay the joy forward to an adopted charity of the day. Or if you normally would pay conference registration, to instead of paying that registration to us, to pay what you would have normally paid for a learning day like this forward to our adopted charities. The adopted charities of the day are on your screen right there. You can learn more about them at gathering.theedcollab.com/charity. Today, our opening keynote, Dr. Sawsan Jaber has adopted for us the Palestine Children's Relief Fund. This fund has been around for decades, supporting medical support and other ways of nurturing Palestinian children. Please go to our website and you can learn more about them and donate directly there. The Freedom to Read Foundation is a sister organization to the American Library Association. They are a small and mighty group that is working to protect all of us against book bans. They need funds to keep operating. Please do go to our page and learn more about the Freedom to Read Foundation. They also have previously been one of our keynotes. And the Trevor Project. The Trevor Project provides 24/7 online support for at-risk LGBTQIA plus youth. The Trevor Project, especially in this environment, is more important than ever. They need funds to keep operating in this political climate. Please do go to that website, learn more about the Trevor Project, and we hope that you'll pay the joy forward. We also invite you to take a moment at some point today to check your voter registration. On your screen are multiple ways to do that through federal organizations like vote.gov or the Election Assistance Commission, or you can go to nonprofits like Rock the Vote. Even if you voted 1,000 times over, this year it's more important than ever to double check your voter registration and make sure that you are still eligible to vote. So before we go to our opening keynote, I'd like to ground our work for today. And as we are talking about teaching literacy in the present tense, let's think about this present tense that we are in now. On your screen is the 15th Amendment. This comes from the National Archives. The 15th Amendment was the one that said, regardless of your race, color, or previous condition of servitude, you have a right to vote in the United States. As you can see, it's mostly handwritten. The 15th Amendment gave the right for more Americans who had recently been freed from the shackles of slavery to vote in this country. It also guaranteed that regardless of your race or color, nothing should get in the way of your right to vote. Then in 1965, on the heels of the Jim Crow era that did exactly the opposite of what the 15th Amendment called for, the Voting Rights Act was passed in our country. It was ratified on August 5th, 1965, and it explicitly is written to enforce the 15th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States and for other purposes. That, as you can see, was no longer handwritten. These are words in print. Then, just this past week on April 29th, the Supreme Court of the United States offered this opinion on Louisiana versus Calais. And as you may know from the news, this basically gutted the last part of the Voting Rights Act, allowing individuals and groups to sue if a state went against the 15th Amendment. The Supreme Court justices used their words to what I feel twist and bend language. For example, there's an entire graph where they talk about what the word elect might mean and how you could interpret that in multiple different ways. In their opinion, they also state in writing that basically the United States no longer has any issues around race like we once did in 1965. Therefore, the protections that were needed then are no longer needed now. In this 61-year span, people have used words to shape the identities that are allowed to take part in our democracy. This just happened this week, and so much more continues to happen. And what I wanted to frame for us this morning is that we as literacy educators carry the most power of, I'd say, anyone in creating the future, because written words shape power. Written words give power, written words take power, and written words are power. And it is no surprise that what has happened in the lead up to this current federal administration and is continuing to happen now has largely been an attack on words and with words. Book bans to take the power that language has to help us see ourselves and each other, that is an attack on our words. Taking words and language and shifting their meaning so they no longer mean the same thing. How a phrase like undocumented people versus illegal immigrants is used throughout media as an attack on our neighbors. Written words have power. And you might be feeling in this time as a literacy educator and just as a human that perhaps your ability to use the words that you want to use on social media, perhaps at your job, or maybe even with your friends, colleagues, and those around you, that you feel silenced and you can no longer speak, which is yet another mark that our civil liberties are being taken away. And so our argument for today is that we need more words, not less. We need to speak up, say more, both through legal documents and through the stories that we tell and through the pushback that we give and through the opportunities that we share, which leads me to introducing our incredible keynote speaker today, Dr. Sawsan Jaber. Dr. Sawsan Jaber, I had the distinct pleasure of hearing at the NCTE annual convention in November, where she began the first NCTE Arab Caucus. Dr. Sawsan Jaber is a national board certified teacher, educator, author, and curriculum leader with more than 20 years of experience, advancing equity-centered teaching and learning grounded in her human-centered pedagogy framework and informed by the collective pedagogies of voice, in which she is a best-selling author, framework. Her work bridges research and practice to humanize school spaces and reimagine what rigorous learning can be. Whenever I've heard Dr. Jaber speak, and even when we've been talking in preparation for today, one thing that I am continually amazed by is that despite everything that she's faced, and she has faced tremendous joys and struggles, especially in this current era, Dr. Jaber never shies away from her words. You can learn more about Dr. Jaber, invite her to speak or consult with your school or organization at drsawsanjaber.com. And it is my absolute distinct pleasure to welcome her today. And we are so looking forward to your talk this morning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. I don't know how I'm going to follow that. There was your keynote, friends. I'm really excited to be here with all of you today, and we're going to get right into it because just like every conversation we've had, we will ever have, this is just the beginning of a conversation. It's never the whole conversation, but hopefully there will be something here for you today to take back into your life, into your classroom space, into your workspace, that will, I keep calling them drops in the ocean, but enough drops will eventually make a wave. And so here we go. The title of the keynote today, and I just want to make sure, are we able to see the screen? Yeah, the title of the keynote today is, hold on a second, sorry, 1 second. We are having technical difficulties. Okay. Oh. Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. So the title of our keynote today is Right Here, Right Now, Literacy as a Humanizing Practice for Transformation. And before we even get into the conversation, I would love for us to really just take a minute to, in the chats, wherever we are, write about our freedom dream for education. What is your boldest dream for the future of education? Really just kind of think about that and carry that with you as we continue our conversation throughout the day, throughout this next half hour. And really thinking about the architecture of this lesson. I want us to think about the timing, which is right here, right now. It's not tomorrow. It's not a year from now. It's not 6 months from now. It's not a strategic plan. The tool that we're leveraging is literacy. Our framework is a humanizing practice, and I am really excited to share parts of my human-centered pedagogy framework with all of you today. And the result that we're looking for is ultimately transformation. We're not looking for anything short of direct transformation. And so we're going to start with a poem because we have to provide our context for now, which Chris just did so beautifully. But I'm going to provide another layer of context that is very proximate to my heart. And it starts with a poem because poetry is the language of the dispossessed, as Aja Monet says, and I think that it is our belonging. And the poem is Khalil Gibran's poem, Fear. It is said that before entering the sea, a river trembles with fear. She looks back at the path she has traveled from the peaks of the mountains, the long winding road crossing forests and villages, and in front of her, she sees an ocean so vast that to enter it, there seems nothing more than to disappear forever. But there's no other way. The river cannot go back. Nobody can go back. To go back is impossible in existence. The river needs to take the risk of entering the ocean because only then will fear disappear, because that's where the river will know it's not about disappearing into the ocean, but of becoming the ocean. And I use Khalil Gibran's words and poetry and art to begin our conversation because every time I start a class with my students and I ask them what is on their heart, the word that I keep hearing is fear. Fear of so many things, fear of uncertainty, fear of a future that we can't determine, fear for loved ones, fear for like a future that they can't even imagine when they graduate. And I teach college students, currently university students. And this was a very similar theme to the students that I taught at high school last year. And so when we think about our current context and we think about the impact of fear on our bodies, both somatically, emotionally, in all the ways, we know that fear hinders people from thinking rationally and acting rationally. And so how do we alleviate fear? How do we get rid of fear? How do we disrupt and dismantle and tear down the fear? And our classrooms are such incubator spaces for that in such real ways, especially literacy classrooms and humanities classrooms. We have the power to do that in such beautiful ways. And so I'm going to position myself in the work very briefly. I come from Palestinian refugees. My parents came here in the 1960s because of the war in Palestine. We were displaced time and time again. And if you want to learn about my family stories, Ta-Nehisi Coates captures a part of it in his last book, The Message, with my grandfather, Sawsan Jaber, and our family's displacement. I always say that my journey is mapped on my father's hands. My father had very strong, beautiful, calloused hands that he used to pave the way for us to be where we are today. These are my father's hands a few days before he passed 7 months ago. And they were not as strong from his chemo treatments as that they had been historically, but still very beautiful. And my father's hands are a symbol of the hard work, of the sacrifice, of the selflessness, of our need to step out of what's comfortable to do what we need to do for those that we love in order for us to be future ancestors that pave the way for those who are coming by modeling all the things that we know we need to model. And so I love his hands so much that I wrote a picture book called My Baba's Hands that I hope will make bookshelves soon. And that I can share parts of his legacy and the footprint, the massive footprint that he left for us to follow in so many different ways. I am a first generation American, first in my family to graduate with a degree, of my family to graduate with a doctorate. These are 4 generations of Jabers kind of celebrating that achievement because it was achievement for all of us. But I carry that with such a great responsibility because with that power, I know that I have that positionality, that privilege. I know that I have to carry forth my ancestors' dreams in so many ways, and that I have to pave the way for our future generations to continue the dream and the work. And so with that, I say I come from giants, I come from dreamers, and I come from doers. And the testament to that is that 8,000 people came to my father's funeral 7 months ago to pay tribute to a man who left craters of a footprint wherever he went in the world. And so many people wanted to honor and tribute him for his legacy that he left for us. And so, thinking about dreaming, I leverage the words of Paulo Freire, who said, in order to dream, we must read the world before we read the word. And that's going to be my central message in everything that we talk about today. It's so important for us to really think about the world that we're living in. We can't separate and expect students to come to class and perform for us by shoving skills down their throat without really giving them the context of the world that we're living in. And so we have to think about all the noise that is in the minds and hearts of our students when they're coming into our classrooms, whether it's the political noise, the algorithms, the identity tensions, or the fractured truths that they have to sift through in order for them to inquire and find what's actually true. And then think about, what does it mean for us to teach in such a loud world? And what shape does our instruction take when we know that these are the conditions and the things that our students are carrying? And so we want to explore some of the things in this really loud world that we're living in this moment. And so here we go. And we already know that we didn't get here today, yesterday, last week, 2 months ago, a year ago. This has been brewing, right? We had manifestos and plans and communication that has indicated that this is where we were headed. And so for us to really think about our role as classroom teachers with all the power that that carries when we stand in front of students and we determine and cultivate the future of tomorrow, we need to remember that we can't take a middle stance or a neutral stance or an apolitical stance is what we called it, because things are too complicated. We idolize a middle stance as a more rational, more fair, more loving stance. We wear it as our own kind of moral superiority, but virtue is not synonymous with neutrality. Integrity demands a choice, right? And at the end of the day, the choice to leave conversations out and to choose certain narratives is very political. And so those who pride themselves on being apolitical are being very political when they're making choices. And so that warrants a different kind of conversation about how we bring the world into our classrooms as the main text, because the present is the pedagogy that we need to be teaching. It is the curriculum, right? And the world continues to get smaller. So we're not even talking about what's local and immediate anymore, because the world is, you no longer have to share a physical space in order for you to share space with people. Technology has made our world so much smaller in such real ways that we have to consider also cultivating an understanding of global events, of global citizenship, right? Because we can see today more than ever how global events impact us very locally, and how we as a country have a hand in so much of the global, so much of what's happening globally, that's going to have a domino effect and impact us right back. And so we have to think about that hidden curriculum. We have to think about how current events define self-concept. How when I have a student who walks into my class after 160 members of her family, of her immediate family, were murdered and massacred in Gaza, and the school says nothing, what that says to her about who she is and how we value her, right? How when another Black man is murdered in front of our eye and we say nothing, what does that say about our Black young men to our Black young men? Right? So we can't separate these things and expect students to perform and shove skills down their throat, because those, and then think about why kids don't come to school anymore and why there's apathy and why there's a lack of engagement. because learning just doesn't matter. It's not the most important thing when the world is happening to our babies every single day. And so we need to think about really teaching our students to radically dream of something that's better, and thinking about reading and writing and literacy as a direct tool to radical dreaming, right? And having them leverage those skills and those tools to notice, name, and interrupt as pathways to making and conduits to making those dreams realities. If we're going to meet this moment, we can't just respond with louder instruction. We must respond with deeper instruction. It has to shift, and the way it looks has to shift radically. And so we need to think about deep learning, and that only happens when intrinsic value and skills are being developed and converge. There has to be a convergence of intrinsic value and the skills that we're developing at the same time in order for students to understand the power of what they're learning and want to learn it, especially in a world of AI. And so I'm going to share the beautiful voice of Lena Brown. And if you've heard me speak, you know I share Lena's voice very often because Lena is one of my many students. But this is her story, and I will let her tell her story on her own because it's much more powerful than I'll ever be able to tell it. And Lena is all those things. I can do a whole keynote just on Lena alone because of how phenomenal she is. I follow Lena, and she is a Kuma Cum Laude graduating in a couple of weeks, if not this week, doing amazing things. And this is the same student that a counselor said, don't bother applying for college. You're not going to make it. And so that's what happens when we can bring our intrinsic skills and our intrinsic value and our skills together. But that requires some paradigm shifts. That requires some bold instruction. And so we're going to talk really quickly through these paradigm shifts because I want to give us practical examples of what it looks like and how to get there. And the first one is that we have to be equity instead of doing equity, and really think about what that means, especially today, right? Because that requires sometimes for us to swim against the current and really think about ways to disrupt in our local intermediate and our school and our private lives and in our local school boards and in all the spaces where we have opportunity to be disruptors. And that also means that when we think about who we surround ourselves around, right? Because if I'm teaching in a diverse community, but I only surround myself with friends who look like me, then that's going to impact how I show up in front of my students. So when we think about really being equitable, that really kind of is a stance and a way of being that follows you no matter where you are in your life. And we have to think about how we're choosing equity in every aspect of our livelihood in order for it to be something that comes naturally and not a hat that we can put on when we're writing a strategic plan or a lesson plan. We have to stop talking about safe spaces, because safe spaces can be weaponized, because when we talk about safety for who? And we have to really think about brave spaces where our students and us are rolling up our sleeves together as co-collaborators, as co-conspirators in the sake of doing good, right? And that's change and collective work. And I encourage everybody to watch Precious Knowledge, the documentary that's also on YouTube, and to watch how Tucson, Arizona did that with their ethnic studies program, with teachers, students, high school kids, and university students all together collaborating in order to make a movement to keep their ethnic studies program, which is also currently under attack again. We have to be political, right? Like this concept of being political, that word in and of itself has been weaponized, because what some people call politics, I call my lived experience. And so when we filter out politics out of a classroom space or out of a school space, we're filtering out certain students' lived experiences and saying that they're not important enough to exist in that space. We have to think about students as content creators, not just content consumers. I know that as a Palestinian, I have never owned my own story. And so it becomes really important for us to think about giving students certain content, short stories, poems, novels, memoirs, with the intention of helping them craft their own stories. And that takes the gatekeeping of deciding what mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors, was an actual mirror for a student versus a stereotypical perception of what I think a mirror for a student is. Because then students are creating their own mirrors that then serve as windows for other students. And that's how we begin to build communities that are close, because of a deep sense of knowing, right? Because we're letting go of that power and we're facilitating. And students are also claiming these literacy skills more than just to pass a test and to get some kind of metric on a standardized exam or for a school. They become intrinsic skills in a toolbox that is then liberatory. And that's ultimately the purpose of our teaching, or at least it should be. We have to think of ourselves as facilitators. We're co-designing instead of designing. I can't tell you how many crowds of teachers I've stood in front of who said, but we just revised the curriculum 6 years ago, or 6 months ago, or a year ago. And here we are, like just a couple of days ago. Our world is changing so quickly and so drastically. And so when we think about really being responsive, A, how are you responsive if you don't even know the students who are in front of you? And B, how are you responsive if you're not integrating what's happening to kids in their immediate moment and in their lives into your classroom every single day in order for them to see the power that they can use and leverage from your classroom space in order to shift the status quo, in order to choose their own pathways, in order to dream of a future that's better and make it happen? What's the point? Right? And then when we talk about these students not coming to class anymore, it's because they can't carry all of that and do school the way we traditionally have asked them to do that. So the only way to bring them back is to bring them back by making it meaningful, by giving them the opportunity to say, hey, I'm not going to make a rubric. Let's come up with that together. Here's what I want you to learn. How do you demonstrate for me that you have learned this skill? Choose the mode and the output that you want to share your learning with all of us, right? And that completely shifts the class, because then students are leveraging their own interests and their own artistic skills and their own lived experiences, their own languages, right? We're asking them to translanguage. We're asking them to bring their ancestral stories and their oral histories for many of our kids today into the classroom in order for them to build that new learning on it. And so we have to think about being transformative, and that requires us to really leverage street data. instead of just the academic data. If we're not talking to students regularly, their parents and the community, giving them a permanent seat at the table where they are design thinking with us, where they're talking through with us, where they're giving us their feedback and pivoting in real time, as opposed to every 6 years or every 3 years or every time there's a curriculum, but we're pivoting and creating very comfortably through the equity transformation cycle over and over again from street data by Safir and Dugan, then we're missing out on something, right? Then we're still acting from a gatekeeper space of what we are comfortable with and what we have, the ways we have learned. And so we have to be very anchored in equity versus in just culture. Culture has a space, but today we have to ask ourselves, how does gender create inequity? How does socioeconomics create inequity? How does religion create inequity? And so when we center equity, we're thinking about all of those factors and not just thinking about the cultural aspect, which is also very important. And we have to be liberatory. We have to really cultivate agency and voice. The days of compliance are over. This is not a generation that just wants to comply. This is not a generation that's just going to do things because we tell them. They want to know why, and they're owed the explanation of why, right? They are bold and they are fierce and they are willing to push the boundaries and make change. We just have to give them the room to do that and not be afraid to let go of some of that power and really share our power with them in order to empower them. Because at the end of the day, we're going to get old and they're going to take over. And every time I stand in front of a group of students, I ask myself, who do I want to lead, to be my doctor, to be my grandchild's teacher, to be my next president? Because they're sitting in our classrooms every single day, and there's a lot of power there, and we need to think about that. And even something as small as really reframing why we write in an AI world, when AI threatens so much, right, in our classrooms every single day, and teachers are trying to navigate that. So here's a way of reframing writing, for example. We tell our students that, and we model that we write to gather the scattered pieces. We write to ignite joy. We write to name what almost disappears. We write to choose what is worth saying, what is the power of your pen, what is what is important for you to write about, as opposed to let me give you this prompt to write about. We write to develop voice and agency, even if we're doing formal writing, there's voice and agency there. The 5-paragraph days are over. I walked by a session on the 5-paragraph essay where people were sitting on a ballroom floor because there weren't enough chairs. Like, I don't understand when we're going to see that those practices really need to be abandoned because it's not speaking to our kids today. We write to humanize what has been reduced, to claim our own stories. We write to reclaim what was interrupted. We write to heal what was silenced and hurt. We write to innovate beyond what confines us. We write to connect across what divides us. We write to inspire what feels dormant. We write to redefine what has been narrowly framed. We write to preserve what must not be erased, to document. We write to transform what no longer serves us. And we write for all of these reasons. And we have to teach students and light the fire for them to feel that writing is all of these students. We don't write to get a grade. We don't write because grammar constructs are important. A period isn't the end of a sentence. A period is where you force someone to stop and sit in your words because you have power. When you write a story, Edgar Allan Poe never gave us a setting or a name for a character because he wanted us to focus on the psyche. So what do you want your reader to focus on? These are the questions that we need to ask students, and we need to build their stamina for the writing. And so I start every single class with a short ignite that is a video, a poem, a short story, something super short, a quote sometimes, and just have students write nonstop. What word stands out to you? What does this bring up for you? Just write. And then we go back to all of those and they write 10, 15 pages a week because they're writing every single day. We're building that stamina. And choose one thought that really stands out on your paper and let's develop it for reclamation, for innovation, for connection, for inspiration, for joy, right? All of the things that we need to think about when we're trying to cultivate this love for the language that we have lost, for literacy, for reading, for writing. And I ground that in our framework, Pedagogies of Voice, because really it is the pathway. It is so many years of work that have fallen into this, to creating this framework, and so many voices and so many students. And it's a practitioner's guide that really kind of, and it is the heart, it's radical love in action in our classrooms, which is what we need to heal. Right. And so it is, the agency framework starts with identity, because I cannot change anything or belong anywhere if I don't know who I am. And the world tells our babies that they are not good enough over and over again. And so do so many of our classrooms and so many of our metrics and ways of measuring success and defining it. And so before we can redefine and help to bolster up the self-concept and self-love, we can't get anywhere. And then the second part of that is building communities of belonging that are really deep rooted in an understanding of each other. My students who I worked with for 2 years are now, Lena's class, are graduating from college, but they're all over the country, and they still keep in touch with each other because they really love each other, because they really understand each other. And these are students who weren't even friends when they entered my classroom space for the most part. There's a sense of belonging that passes physical space, because they really built these deep connections and advocated for each other and built communities together. And then it's inquiry, right? When AI and algorithms threaten this concept of, we are like headed towards this dystopian society where we have CEOs of organizations standing up in front of teachers and saying, we don't have to teach our kids to think anymore. Let's just teach them to love. AI will do the thinking for them. We are hinging on such dangerous times when we allow other people, because these devices and these tools are AI, are man-made tools, to do the thinking for us, and we stop cultivating these tools of inquiry and importance, right? How important they are for us to really keep our autonomy. And when we lose inquiry, we lose autonomy, and we lose our ability to make our own choices. And that's such a dangerous thing. And then finally, the question that I always ask my students is, now that you know, what are you going to do with what you know? Efficacy becomes such a critical tool, right? Because we don't want our kids to sit in a space of hopelessness, because it can feel super overwhelming at times. And so ultimately what we want is for them to build that efficacy, and for our classrooms to be conduits to action. And so pedagogies of voice asks, who gets to speak, who gets heard, who gets affirmed, who gets erased? Right? Those are all the questions that we need to be asking, because ultimately voice is the unmistakable personality on the page. It's rhythm, tone, cadence, and attitude working together. It's how a sentence leans in instead of standing stiffly. It's what makes one paragraph sound human and another sound manufactured. Voice comes from choice. Word choice, sentence length, what a writer wants to emphasize or leaves unsaid. It reflects a worldview, emotional temperature, and intent. Grammar creates structure, voice creates connection. When readers feel seen, they keep turning pages, and when they feel corrected, they drift away. And that's the same for writers, right? Because reading and writing is the same craft, and their readers are writers, right? Your readers are our best writers. And so we have to think about, what does it mean to redefine literacy as a humanizing practice for global transformation, right? All of these different things. So we have to think about global awareness and understanding, and then literacy in action. And so global awareness and understanding is not the knowledge of global issues. Again, our world is small. It's not enough for them to just understand the local and immediate, but we really have to branch out into a global context and help them to develop the skills to be in space with people who are so different than them, but to also understand how the world works and how things are interconnected. We have to think about cultivating intercultural competence and giving students the opportunity through technology as a tool in that space to connect with people across the board who look like them and who don't, especially if we teach in homogeneous school districts. Even if our students are all brown, that's not diversity, right? Or Black. But school districts where many of our students share identity markers, it becomes even more important for us to connect them with intentionality to other groups so that they can have conversations and learn about different perspectives. I did lightning talks in my classroom every week, where I brought in professionals and voices that I knew my students wouldn't get the opportunity to hear. People who look like them, who weren't represented in our school teaching force, and people who didn't look like them, in order for them to hear the stories of so many people. And that was literally 15 to 20 minutes of somebody coming into our class virtually and talking to them every week. And again, student feedback, it was one of their favorite parts of the class. So there's a lot of easy ways to really cultivate all of these different voices seamlessly. Empathy and perspective taking, again, something that we take for granted, but we have to really build some of those skills across the board, very intentionally. Things like deep listening. I remember the first time I said, we're going to have a conversation, a critical conversation. And Lena Brown said, but Dr. J, nobody ever taught us how to do that. And I stood for a second and I said, wow, like we assume kids can deeply listen. We assume they can have critical conversations. We assume that adults can do the same. And in so many of those cases, they can't. And so we have to kind of set model and talk about developing those skills, especially in a post-COVID generation where they sat in isolation for a year and a half and didn't have to do any of those things, really. And so how do we cultivate those skills in order to give them the tools to be able to really connect and create and do all the things we want them to do? And then really thinking about active citizenship, right? Moving away from just addressing, but to actually take part. And some things as simple as voting and being civically engaged, right? And understanding how global events are connected. Those are all really important. And that helps us to redefine advocacy and activism, and ultimately leads us to a space where literacy is transformation because we're using it to humanize historically criminalized people. We're leveraging student stories and lived experiences in our classroom, which are the best text and the best opportunity. And they're growing, and they're able to, when we talk about college and career readiness, postgraduate success, right? It's not getting a good job anymore because we don't even know what the job force is going to look like. But it's having such a wide range of tools in their toolbox that they can navigate a world that's forever changing faster than we can keep up with, right? AI, research shows that AI, every 3 hours, there's a new AI tool being developed. So we don't even know what we're preparing them for. They don't know what they're being prepared for. So we have to expansively give them these toolbox to navigate a lot of different terrains and situations. And so what does this look like in action, right? Research is a form of activism. This is a unit I did with my sophomores, research, and it was our research/genocide unit. Our essential questions were, what is oppression and what are the root causes? What are the stages of hate and how do they lead to dehumanization? And where have we seen examples of dehumanization historically, and where do we see examples of dehumanization today? I had a very diverse group of students, and it was really important for me to not teach genocide as something historic when we have several ongoing genocides in the world today. And we have so many examples of dehumanization literally at the fingertips of our students, and they were experiencing them. And so we started by giving them huge poster-sized blowouts of the pyramid of hate and walking them through the pyramid of hate. And then it was really important for us to develop shared understandings. What does it mean? What does hate mean? What do the levels of hate mean? What do they look like? And so we started with a group of texts with students that we kind of navigated together as entire classes, and students processed through their own journaling every single day. We journal every day, but also through their own pyramid of hate and putting post-it notes as they read of examples from these texts. So we read chapter 2 of the message where Ta-Nehisi Coates was navigating his own identity as a man who comes from enslaved ancestors, but also comes from Africa, and reconciling both of those identities together, and his own schooling in the process of that. We watched The Monsters Do on Maple Street, The Twilight Zone, and talked about the mob mentality and how that can shift things and how quickly people can go from becoming neighbors to enemies. We read excerpts from Frankenstein because it's also important for them to see and kind of the different texts and understand too canon texts and how they've historically functioned. So we'll take excerpts and kind of bring that into the conversation as well. We watched Pocahontas because I wanted them to also understand that they have been conditioned to see these things as what they are ever since they were kids. The Danger of a Single Story, we unpacked that, and then we gave them a choice to listen to one of the episodes from the 1619 Project and then map that along the Pyramid of Hate. And then they got to choose one of these memoirs or texts that were all examples of dehumanization from different backgrounds. So students worked in groups. Groups got to choose one text from 16 different texts. These are some of them. And then they, orienting towards agency, did a bunch of stuff where they researched. They sat in circle every single day. They unpacked together, and you can see we journal daily. We have collaborative conversations in circle. My desks are always against the wall. The middle of my classroom is empty so that we can sit in circle. And sometimes when Roe versus Wade was overturned, my students said, Dr. J, can we please sit in circle? We need to unpack this. It came from them. It became a ritual where we sat in circle and really had those hard conversations with no barriers between us, an indigenous practice, right? And then we cultivate community connection. So I would bring all of my classes together. once every few months in order for us to really share across classes, because our classes were so different, the conversations were different. And so giving them the agency to kind of elevate the things that were important to them as a larger community and to build connections across the community. So the students, they curated their own text sets with research, and we started by asking AI questions and really filtering through the bias of AI and getting them to think about why AI may not be the best tool and how we can leverage it as a tool. And they curated their Wakelet pages. You could see that in the first page, so developing inquiry and critical thinking about what's a good text, why isn't it a good source. They reflected by creating a blog site that they called To Be Honest. And so every single one of their sites as they went along was To Be Honest. And these were public. So students got to share their thoughts and their thought formation and their criticality with their entire group. So instead of learning about one genocide, students got to learn about all these examples of dehumanization. And what I did was I gave them, we called it dehumanization, and then I gave them the definition of genocide from the United Nations. And ultimately, and they shared with teachers, this is a keynote that we did with the students in front of 20,000 teachers at ISTE. What they ultimately had to do was they had to create a 10-minute documentary that synthesized their research and had to analyze the definition of the United Nations of genocide again from the United Nations against their research. And they had to determine, is what they studied a genocide or not? So we weren't calling it that, but they had to determine that on their own, because we don't call what happened to our enslaved ancestors genocide. We don't call what happened to our native ancestors genocide. We don't call what's happening in a lot of the world today genocide. And so it was important for me that they think about all of these things and they determine if they felt like it was genocide based on the pyramid of hate and their definition. And then they had to make that determination using evidence and then call their peers to action. And so this was an example of a student, which we won't have time to watch, of a student product, but they got to then watch 16 different documentaries about 16 different forms of dehumanization and learn about a bunch of different global perspectives as opposed to learning about one. And all of it was student facing. And a lot of it was group work. A lot of it was individual work. They did a little bit of everything, but I walked around as a facilitator as they read, annotated, synthesized, analyzed, and created together in groups. And so for our closing, I'm going to say that the only thing more powerful than hate is love, right? Because that is what our world requires more than anything right now. In the words of Nikita Grail, as only love can build community and only love can hold hope tightly, when the world burns around it and only love is the promise, that what is broken can be rebuilt better. And only love gives us countless stories of resilience in the face of despair. And that is why love matters. And love is all that there is. And all of this is to say that building with compassion is harder than destroying with hatred. But despite it all, hope will win over despair, just like love will win over hate. And that leads us to our call to action. Your charge is that this time it's come for us. The time has come for us to immerse ourselves in the hard work of healing our schools through the radical love and through radical love and by giving the students the gift of dreaming back, which requires us to make the mindset shifts and the instructional shifts that come alongside them. We have to let go of our power. And I know that I don't believe that there's a single teacher who goes into the profession to harm students, but I know I have harmed students when I sit down to reflect because I have been socialized by the same systems as many of us have been. And so using our reflective tool and really thinking about the ways that we've harmed students and shifting our practice in a moment that our livelihood, our future depends on it and requires it, right? This is the moment. It's not tomorrow. It's not in a week. It's now. It's now if it hasn't happened already for you in your classroom. And it might sound like a lot, but start somewhere. Start by just rebuilding student self-concept. Start there, right? Nobody can tell you that you can't do that. So if you're listening and you're coming from a school where there's so much red tape, there are ways within your locus of control to do this work. And that's simply by restoring student self-concept, by moving the desks in your room against the wall and having students sit in circle and building community, by humanizing the students in your classroom and allowing them to build deep human connections. We heal our communities one classroom at a time, one student at a time. That is the work, right? And so I know that was really fast. And so I've published several chapters and an award-winning journal. I want to share with you those things. If you want more details on what that looks like in details with text sets and other things, every single one of these books has either a chapter or an entire book. You can click on the QR page, which is also on my website. The journal is free and you can leverage that. There's also a blog post that I publish and student works that I publish very often. So you're welcome to use all of those things. And I'm not biased about Pedagogies of Voice, but it really is the book that meets this moment. So definitely start there if you want more tips on how to do this. I would love your feedback because I'm always looking to grow, and the street data is the most important data. And I hope that we get to stay connected. And I pray that you have taken something here and that you are hopeful and that you feel like your cup is full, because we have some very big, important work to do and we need to roll up our sleeves and get it done. So thank you so much for being with me today. Thank you so much for sharing this space. Thank you, Chris, and the Educator Collaborative group, because you guys are awesome for hosting this conversation and for elevating my voice. I appreciate all of you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much. As you saw from the comments on our YouTube chat, and both Jessica and I, just our faces in the background as we're listening, you truly have started off our day in I can think of no better way. There are so many notes I took. One thing I just especially is resonating with me is when you talked about how this is not a generation of compliance. And the amount of, and I get, we all vent, there all are difficult times, and sometimes a student bothers us. But I think in a time of social media where there's a lot of like anger and hate against this generation and all the things that they're doing wrong, and look at how these students aren't doing what they need to do. I think you're really charging us with really holding up. The reason why they're not compliant is because they want better, and that they have passion, and that they have tools that we don't have, and they have ways of thinking about the world and media and themselves. And I just really appreciate that I mean, throughout this talk and throughout all of your work, how you center humanity for adults, for children. This will sit with me for a long time after today. So thank you, Sawsan, so much for being a part of our day and for kicking it off so powerfully.
Thank you, Chris. Our kids are phenomenal, and we just need to love them into showing them how phenomenal they are, because the world has told them otherwise. And I didn't see the chat, so I didn't realize that the video did not have sound. So I apologize for that. But thank you. Thank you again for hosting me and for having me here. I appreciate you.
Of course. Thank you. Appreciate you as well. If you would like to connect, which of course you do, if you would like to connect with Dr. Sawsan Jaber, you can find her at her website. It's hername.com. Also, if you were inspired by today, please help us in paying the joy forward. Putting up a QR code in the corner of your screen there. And throughout the day, we'll remind you anything that you would have paid for perhaps a coffee during your lunch break, or maybe registration to join a conference like today, please do consider paying the joy forward. You can go to our charity page. None of the funds go directly to us. Instead, we invite you to click on those charities, learn about them, and then contribute what you can. If you have contributed before in past gatherings, thank you. Please continue to do so. If you never have before and you've heard me talk about this and you've kind of thought about it, but you haven't really gone, scan that QR code right now, or go to the website gathering.theedcollab.com/charity. And there you can learn about our charities for the day. The Palestine Children's Relief Fund started decades ago to support medical care and other urgent care for children, Palestinian children, which of course is needed now more than ever. You can learn more about them and donate directly there. The Freedom to Read Foundation, a sister organization to the American Library Association, which has been fighting against the wave of book bans, which still have continued into 2025. Their work is essential for civil rights and for the freedom to read freely. Free people read freely. So please go and learn about them. And the Trevor Project directly supports LGBTQIA youth in crisis with their 24/7 suicide hotline. And they also support a wide variety of research and mentorships. And so please learn more about the Trevor Project there. Looking forward to the upcoming sessions. Coming up in just 2 minutes, you can hear from Beth and Rosa, who will be leading a 30-minute workshop on Beyond Silence and Compliance, designing learning spaces rooted in multilingual voices. Or you can tune in to Lois Barker's book talk, Books on Legacy, Advocacy, and Gentrification. And all of the sessions today are recorded. And so if you wish you were in 2 places, you actually will be able to be in 2 places. You could watch one live and then come back to another recorded. So once again, thank you so much to our incredible keynote speaker. Thank you, Sawsan Jaber. And please do pay the joy forward. This work takes all of the things Dr. Jaber told us, the ways that we think about our classrooms and our support. It also takes us supporting groups that are working locally, that have the expertise that's needed, and that have been doing this over time. And so you paying anything, even $5 to these charities, is a way that you help them to continue to do the incredible work and the necessary work that they're doing on the ground. Please join us for the rest of the day, and then I'll see you back for the closing this afternoon as we think about teaching literacy in the present tense. Thank you all for all that you do. I hope that you have an incredible rest of your day, and please continue paying the joy forward. Take care, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your gathering conference.